Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 Quick Match gameplay. This time around we are in Troll Country playing as the High Elves against the forces of Brettonia. In this situation, my opponent decided to go very wide and not bring too much cav, but this was a build nonetheless that I wanted to kind of demonstrate as one of those more functional, what I consider a more functional High Elf build against Brettonian. So quickly running things over, as you can see our front line is very small. A single unit of White Lions, flanked by 3 spearmen, and then Teclis here in the center. If we quickly go over his skills, I do have basically what I think are pretty good skills for this. Bound Fire Convocation, good for destroying lined up infantry. Of course, Brettonia has a lot of light infantry, so this is very good. Plus, this is a fairly safe spell. It does fire damage, so it's fairly safe to cast it on top of your Dragon Princes. Of course, he does have Potion of Troy, Regrowth, great for healing up your cav, and Fueling Foe, great for weakening enemy cav. Flaming Sword of Ruin, which I think is actually amazing here. Stacked on top of Kindle Flame, you can increase enemy fire weakness, plus you get improved weapon damage on your non-AP Dragon Princes. And on top of that, it gives you magic damage, which bypasses the physical resist on, say, Green Knights, Grail Guardians, those sorts of units, giving you functionally a pretty massive boost to damage output. It's definitely pretty useful. And then Net of a Mintok to help isolate enemy targets, or to deny enemies trying to interfere with the main cavalry engagement. Otherwise, quickly running over things, like we discussed, cheap front line, 4 Dragon Princes. So I have 3 on normal ones, and then the Fireborn over here. So Dragon Princes surprisingly actually trade really okay with Grail Knights. Usually they start, if you do a 1v1 and Grail Knights charge you, you start falling apart once you lose Martial Mastery. So I'm figuring that with the magic support of Teclis, with the help of these nobles, I've got 2 nobles mixed in, we should have enough stopping power to deal with Grail Knights. That's basically it. It's a very cav-heavy build. We're basically trying to outduel the Brettonians at their own game. Now for my opponent, he did decide to go very wide, so not the ideal situation to test much of anything. A bunch of peasant mobs, Beast Slayer to Bastion, some Battle Pilgrims in there, some Men-at-Arms, Fey Enchantress on foot, surprisingly, with all of her spells, and no Chalice of Potions, a Field Trebuchet, Grail Guardians, as well as a Paladin over here on the flank. And then over here we do have a single unit of Knights Errant, so nothing too fancy for my opponent. Going for a very infantry-heavy build. But I basically just wanted to demonstrate here that how to utilize this sort of composition and kind of demonstrate this composition and show you guys what it's all about. Because honestly, I don't get too many games as High Elves against Brettonia, so it's unfortunately usually if I pick High Elves, people pick something else, and if I pick Brettonia, well, yeah, sure, I might run into High Elves, but that doesn't quite give the correct impression. So. Figuring, you can see here we are pushing forward. I'm using the Dragon Princes, of course, much like Grail Guardians or Grail Knights, are a very versatile cavalry unit. They can be function like a normal shock cav, though they don't have that secondary anti-large function. They still have decent enough stats to make it work. You can see here that meaty charge plunging into those Battle Pilgrims, doing a lot of damage. My opponent does try to get around here with his Knights Errant, but the Noble is on station to intercept and start whittling them down. Meantime, on the other end, we're getting a nice meaty charge into these Grail Guardians with the Fireborn. We'll do quite a lot of damage to these guys, and we've got that Noble mixed in the fray there as well. So you can see on the charge they're trading pretty effectively, but shortly thereafter we do have good old Teclis swinging around to provide us support, and you can see the Flaming Sword of Ruin goes down. You can see just how much damage is being done very quickly to these Grail Guardians. We hit them into the Enfeebling Foe, making them very vulnerable, and then actually do hit the Fireborn with the Regrowth. So massive investment on this flank. Normally, if your opponent does bring, say, Grail Knights, you don't have to invest that heavily in spells and support and whatnot. Usually the fight will be over much quicker, so honestly, if you lose a bunch of stuff and don't get your regrowth off, it's okay. The fight's probably going to be over pretty quickly. But nonetheless, you can see these Grail Guardians have a pretty miserable time getting melted down, and the Fireborn, of course, trading incredibly well. In the meantime, frontline fight, going down, getting a lot of efficiency out of these Spearmen. The Dragon Princes melting this pocket of troops, crushing the Battle Pilgrims, and all the while we're kind of destroying the Knights Errant here. The Knights Errant, of course, are dirt cheap crap cav, so there's not really much to say there. Dragon Princes will destroy them, but as you can see, we're kind of whittling my opponent down. He does try to get a Dwellers Below here, which I was kind of ignoring. I'm like, oh, it's just an Awakening of the Wood, I'll ignore it. But, we do get melted down pretty badly. And you can see this is still a pretty potent spell. It still does a lot of damage. Hurts my Dragon Prince quite a bit, but we're going to be able to cycle right back in right after that spell wears off. And it did do quite a bit of friendly fire damage there as well. Anytime here in the pits, you can see our Dragon Princes have been sort of ping-ponging back and forth between the Battle Pilgrims and then this unit of Men-at-Arms with shields. While we do grind down these Grail Guardians, but you can see the Grail Guardians with their monstrous 56 melee defense, even against the Fireborn, are just holding so strong. And of course, with their permanent freshness, they hold really well against the slowly but surely getting tired Dragon Princes. But yeah, we're ping-ponging around. The Dragon Prince is up to 60 kills. These Fireborn up to 37, most of that against heavy cav. Spears, of course, not doing amazing, but the White Lions do win their section up front, so they're going to be able to push through onto the Trebuchets. In the meantime, Teclis is in here doing some damage, but having shattered this sort of periphery, these Dragon Princes are now free to run amok and then collapse inward. In the meantime, the Noble here hunting the Elder League. And you can see the Dragon Princes here, who did take a mauling from that earlier Dwellers Below, are actually doing a lot of damage on the charge with their monsters, 80 charge bonus. Their weapon strength, of course, gets a huge buff, and they are able to do a lot of hurt. And of course, this Grail Lake is not long for this world. These Dragon Princes over there are doing some mop-up. In the meantime, we are now on top of the Trebuchet, just destroying it. So we have lost a single segment of front line, not the biggest tragedy ever. I did manage to hit these Grail Guardians with a second enfeebling foe. To whittle them down, make them go down a little quicker, of course, to the Noble as well as the Fireborn, and they are going to have a pretty miserable time of it. They're going to get shut down pretty hard here. You can see the Paladin there getting routed off, and the Men-at-Arms trying to interfere, but really they're not. They're non-issue. But the Grail Guardians definitely holding pretty well. I was shocked actually how well the Grail Guardians held out against the Fireborn, who are top tier anti-large cav. They're not AP obviously. Grail Guardians do have 120 armor, but nonetheless, I was definitely pretty surprised and not in a pleasant manner. Nonetheless, it doesn't really matter. These spears are going to rally. I'll be able to push them in to tie down the Beastlayers of Bastogne, who are trying to zone out my cav over there. And in the meantime, here in the pits, things are going south for my opponent very, very quickly. His Trebuchet is offline. I'm using my White Lines of Crace to do sort of mop-up duty here on these useless peasant units. And now the Dragon Princes are collapsing inward on the Brettonian forces. And so at this point, it's basically just fast-forward time as we run through. I'm trying to extricate my Noble there, get a nice little Fiery Convocation. Enchantress is trying to use her Drain effect. You can see we didn't get too many kills on Teclis with Fiery Convocation, so not the most useful, but nonetheless, a Pyrrhic victory for the High Elves. Now, this was not sort of an optimal situation, and I do apologize for that. Unfortunately, this sort of ideal situation that I've demonstrated was the replay I had against Dov, where he promptly trounced me, and I was running a more conventional build. But nonetheless, I did sort of want to demonstrate what this sort of build would look like, what this sort of composition against Brettonia can appear to be. And it's very strong. If your opponent goes infantry heavy, the Dragon Princes will beat the infantry. They're such a strong unit that they will dumpster these sort of trash Brettonian chaff troops pretty heavily. That's one of the cool things. That's honestly one of the nice things about Grail Knights as well for Brettonia, is that even if your opponent does not play into your strengths, if he doesn't go heavy on cavalry or large targets, they're still such a versatile unit that they can do well against low-end infantry. That's one of the problems for Empire with Demigryph Knights with Halberds. That's why you never want to bring too many Demigryph Knights with Halberds, because they're not a flexible cavalry unit. Yes, they are the elite of the elite. If your opponent brings some single target large, if they bring heavy cav, they will dumpster them. But if your opponent does not, if they don't play into your strengths, honestly, Demigryph Knights with Halberds or relative Griff Fights, they're an incredibly expensive unit that it's just not that good. Yeah, sure, obviously they'll like beat Battle Pilgrims or whatever, but their charge is not as impactful, their damage is not that high. They're just kind of mediocre unit in some ways for those sorts of situations, and it's unfortunate. Whereas the Dragon Princes, of course, just absolutely monstrous. You can see these guys raking in hundreds of kills. These guys, of course, stayed tied down fighting Grail Guardians throughout the game, so that is what it is. But 82 kills, still nothing to laugh at. Dragon Princes in the hundreds, the White Lions in the hundreds, and of course the Nobles also sniping key targets like the Grail Relic, like the Grail Guardians, the Knights Errant, the Paladin. So definitely paying their dues. For my opponent's build, like I said, I wouldn't consider this a competitive build. If you're trying to go against High Elves, bring heavy cav nonetheless. Even though this is the Elven counter build, in my opinion, or one of the better High Elf counter builds, you still want to go heavy cav as Brettonia. Even if your opponent does go with this, in that case, it comes down to micro. It essentially comes down to how well you can manage your forces as Brettonia. It becomes a bit of a micro duel, a bit of a positioning duel. But in the end, it's still a fight. It's still a fight that Brettonia does have a little bit of an edge in, I would say, especially with Enchantress's help. Regardless, good game to my opponent here. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video, mostly just as a demonstration of what this sort of build should look like. If you have any comments, any criticism, any questions, anything like that, be sure to share them, and I'll respond as soon as I can. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye for now.